and we'll, okay.
Sorry, we just had a brief blip, a lost few seconds. But I put a link to the handout for those of you that didn't get it in the email, and it's also now on screen.
Yeah, someone says looking for opportunities is key to entrepreneurial success. Absolutely. Yeah, so any thoughts or reactions you have, you can feel free to share them. Um, and as I said, this article is in was in Harvard Business Review. It's still available, although it's behind a paywall. We wanted to try to send it out, and then Maria reminded me that we would get in trouble with copyright if we did that. So that's why I'm trying to summarize it. And then I'll talk a little bit about how we train this. But removing resistance, yes. Sarah, thank you for that question. So this is an idea. I wish we could do this because I love to do this in person, but this is an idea that comes from Kurt Lewin, who was Mort Deutsch's mentor, who studied physics and also psychology and conflict. And he said that change happens, but that one of the best ways to understand how change happens is to understand situations where change doesn't happen. And when situations don't happen, and when change doesn't happen in situations, it's often because you have very strong drivers pushing it, pushing towards the change, and very strong resistance. And that what most of us do when we're trying to enact change is we drive, we try to push, we try to, encourage or persuade or increase. But what most of us don't think about is what are the resistance factors? And then if you actually, if you push in a very tense situation, you usually just increase tension, increase energy, increase enmity. But if you can think about, well, what are the resistances here? You can start to remove the resistances and sort of move people in the ways that perhaps you want to move anyway, without increasing tension. That's his sort of basic idea. And so it really is asking yourself, not how do I get them to do what I want them to do, but what are the obstacles here to them doing this? And are there things that I can offer and introduce into the conversation, or kinds of support that actually may, and sometimes in mediation, that's really simply caucusing and talking to people and saying, you seem very, unwilling or unable, or find this, the ask very challenging. Can you tell me more about that? What are those challenges? So that you could start to address what those might be and how those might be addressed, which might allow parties to move forward. Um, Okay, so let's see. Do you apply these principles to employees or leaders? Well, in the article, they're all exemplified by leaders, by top negotiators, and I don't know if you consider negotiators leaders, but but then organizational leaders. But these things apply to everybody. Again, these are capacities that I think are useful for everybody, particularly like adaptivity is something we've written a lot about for all kinds of, for mediators and for negotiators. Um, so these principles are useful in general, but what I was interested to see is, do leaders and kind of top negotiators use them, and is there some kind of sequence? And that's what we found. Um, they treat conflict as an asset to be harnessed. Yeah, we found that to be critical, Michael, is that seeing the potential in conflict, the power, the energy, the potential that can emerge in conflict is a critical competency of high IQ conflict intelligent leaders. Because again, it's hard, right? When you're the subject of the grievance, when people are coming at you, it's very hard to be able to get over that. And I
You
have to
know,
say, one of the things I've been very impressed by Claire Shipman, who's the current president, acting president at Columbia, is her capacity to have grace under pressure. I've seen her at meetings with the board, meetings with students, meetings with the faculty, Senate, and, basically under a barrage of attacks. And she is able to sit with it, hear it, respond respectfully and respond in kind, and sort of say, this is the context of our decision, and this is but if you have better ideas, come to me. So it is the capacity to realize that in those moments, if you don't personalize them, if you see them as a signal of energy, then they provide the opportunity to kind of open things up and move you forward, not just shut us down. Let's see, let me see what I'm seeing here. North Star depends on high-low context, cultural background, and setting. Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, again, so I guess that means whether your North Star is about you individually or the group as a whole. I think that's what your point is. The reality is that we all face, if you're a manager or leader of an organization or an institution, oftentimes you need to think about both, right? You need to think about your job, you need to think about the organization's viability and, effectiveness and success. So you have to be managing those social dilemmas um, as a both and, not as an either or. You may be more inclined to focus on one versus the other. There are gender differences on that, but I think most leaders have to, if they're going to be effective, understand both. Do these principles framework with these principles and framework? I missed that, sorry. How is successful practice measured? Well, what we've done to measure it is just look at the culture that they foster. So if leaders are using these practices, do the employees feel like they can take risks, they can speak up, they can get their work done, that the leadership has their back, do they trust them? Is there some sense of psychological safety and the ability to step up and confront, speak truth to power? So it's really the behaviors in the culture and climate that are established by leaders that we see as the critical assessment of these. Can you please address the cross-cultural question above?
So that was are there adaptations to cross-cultural distinctions that you use with the tools that you're taking
Not
about?
yet. Not yet. Again, if you read the article, what you'll see is that this is a highly internationalized group that evidence these. And so these are international diplomats from many countries. These are organizational leaders with very, very different kind of cultural, ethnic backgrounds. Um, and so in general, there's value in this. I will say that in the research that we've done, for example, let me just talk about adaptivity, the capacity to use different strategies. We've done research in the US on that, which shows that adaptivity is really important as a leader in the US in terms of how employees see them. And it's actually more important than being cooperative all the time. Because if you in conflict are always cooperating, sometimes you're seen as weak, you can't control a room, you can't control a meeting. And so you need to be able to use these different strategies. We did a study in South Korea, same kinds of effects, adaptivity, the capacity to use different strategies in situations where they fit was really important. In China, in mainland China, where we did one study, we didn't see those effects. We saw adaptivity as somewhat suspect, and that there was much more of an inclination to encourage people to be more cooperative and supportive. Again, in a very high collectivist culture. It was interesting to see the differences in South Korea and China, but there were differences. So there are cultural differences that happen. What we find is that the strategies that people use in different kinds of power situations are consistently used in different cultures. But which strategies are normative or expected or effective will differ in different cultural societies. So there are certainly cultural differences to all of these things. But I was interested in doing the practices, what we're talking about right now, these 7 principles, in identifying a culturally inclusive group and understanding are they common across them, and they seem to be, at least to date. Okay, so I wonder if I should just move on. I have about 15 minutes, is that right? Left?
Yeah, it's 15 minutes.
Okay.
We have a hard stop at 10 a.m. Eastern New York time. So,
Okay.
and I know there's a lot of questions, but this is maybe fodder for offline follow-up afterwards.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Again, I'm happy to. either take questions by email, or I don't know if we'll have a lot of time after 10 o'clock, but what I do want to do is just two more points. Um, so again, being at Columbia during this time has been enlightening because, yes, we're conflict resolvers. Yes, we got a bunch of us at Columbia. And yet still there were these tumultuous events that seemed to run away. And it really felt like some of our best solutions weren't particularly useful. And so what I wanted to do, the principles I just offered you, I think are sound principles for a longer term vision of how to respond. And some of them are useful in the moment. But what I was interested in doing is trying to think about how would you implement, what would you do when a firestorm like, October 7th happens in an institution and it becomes weaponized and politicized and divides the faculty and divides the students and divides the administration? Like, what do you do in these kinds of extreme crises? And that's one of the papers I think we sent out to you was this framework, which does build on the competencies and the principles, but is saying in an extreme situation, how do you respond? And what I will say is that this is the kind of model that emerged. Let me just give you the context. Oh no, I guess I didn't have this here. So what I did for this to elicit this was go to two different sources. It really is about addressing fire crises, runaway firestorms, or wildfires. And there's two sources of insight that I leaned heavily into, and this is described in that paper that we sent you. One is indigenous peoples who have a very different relationship with fire. So there is a particular group in the West Coast, the Yurok tribe, and they have a long legacy and tradition of kind of working with fire, tending fire, building fire lines, thinking about fire as a value and a resource and again, a source of energy and opportunity, but that their relationship with fire isn't just to put it out, which is what a very kind of Western approach is, but it is to live with it and use it in a proactive way. And part of why the US has had so many problems with wildfires is because of how we've thought about fire prevention for so long is really just misguided. And it doesn't recognize that. So I studied some of how their practices and how they approach and think about fire. And then I looked to a guy named Paul Gleason, who was a hot spot fire jumper expert who in many ways emulated and learned from some of the cultural practices and built a sort of response to extreme fires. And he ran these fire crews that would jump into these extraordinarily difficult, out of control fires. How do you think about them? How do you do them? And really, that was the set of competencies that I tried to basically take the principles and embed them into, the need for radical clarity in terms of your own sense of yourself and your accountability and your anticipation of what might happen next, effective communication and transparency, the critical need for that. Columbia really messed up on that. They just insulated the leaders and weren't communicating. Strategic adaptivity, flexible decision making. Again, that's very similar to the other principles, but the need to be able to pivot as the conditions change quickly, creating conflict safe and conflict positive environments. So firefighters really think ahead about what's the pathway out and how do we make sure that we have a pathway out and what does that look like? And in conflict environments, that is creating spaces where people can come together and safely be able to process these things and not just avoid conflicts. And then ultimately, these practices are institutionalized and become systematic. And it is something that Paul Gleason did for the firefighting world, is really create a simple framework that leaders still use today. He did this in the 70s, so that they have an institutionalized set of practices that are effective and have been shown to work, And that ultimately leads to what they call enduring resilience and growth outcomes. So it is about recognizing conflict like fire as an opportunity to enhance resilience and growth and that kind of possibility, but to manage these crises in a way that lead you there. So there are a couple of papers out on this. I think we sent you, I know we sent you the Greater Good Science version. I guess that's the only one we sent, but there's another paper that came out in, I think it was in August or September of last year, of this year, which talks a little bit more about this in detail. But before I go, let me get to the last point. And the last point is, so if you were interested in bolstering your or your institution's, kind of collective intelligence, what would you do? And so what we've been doing at the center is working on not conflict training. I think conflict training has a place, but I think ultimately, even as a lifelong teacher and trainer, I know that a lot of it doesn't stick. So we've been trying to think about how do we create educational experiences for people that work for them, that can use different modalities, sort of online video content, assessments, apps as like just-in-time tools that you can use. And then how do we create educational experiences that are really based on you and the conflicts that you have and the challenges you face? Because what I find is that when people need something, when a university is in crisis and leaders really don't know how to deal with like tense racial conflicts in their department or in their community, that's when they're really interested in those skills. To mandate trainings for people more generally, less so. It's really a sort of a just-in-time approach. So we've created kind of 8 sessions that will provide both individual field work based on your conflicts, and they're designed as building blocks. And they use both casework and discussion and field experiments and AI tools. And these are the modules actually that you can see them here. It is this sort of set of building block modules of focusing on you and yourself, and then reflecting on your interpersonal conflict skills. We have an assessment for this that we created years ago, which is a sort of 360 assessment of you. We ask you to send it to 2 people in your life who will be very candid with you so that you have some feedback on your conflict skills. And then how to hold difficult conversations is the kind of 3rd session. Then we move into the situational. So these again are building blocks. And we teach these in 2 chunks. The first one, self, the two social, and the situational, navigating power and conflict, are the first, which we call the Conflict Intelligence Certificate. And then those that want to go on can take managing teams, leading divisive times, unlocking impossible conflicts, and then conflict intelligent leadership, which is the principles and the rescue framework. And this is a combination of online. Let's see, do I have this here? It is a combination of online content that you can take asynchronously. You can watch it when you can. And then it's online virtual processes that are about 4-hour modules for each. And then there is a weekend intensive where people come together and kind of help connect the dots for both conflict intelligence and for the certificate. And so if you're interested in this, we piloted this over the last summer. We've learned a ton. We've revised the structure and the offerings, and we'll plan to start to promote them in January, February, and then launch them formally this summer in June. So that we'll have the first cohort of conflict intelligence in June, and then probably in July have a cohort of conflict intelligent leadership. And we hope to offer these sequences every a couple of times a year so that people have options to do this. But that is what we're doing. That is the end of that. We have 6 minutes to have conversation. But again, let me just emphasize that I give you a lot of information here. it's all based on, as I said, decades of empirical research. But the center, the Morton Deutsch Center that I direct, our mission is to try to keep research practical and to keep practice informed by research. That is our whole mission. And so what we've been trying to do is do science that is useful for people in times like ours today, and then translate them into apps, assessments, and educational experiences that are useful and applicable. I'm, not a terribly big fan of traditional trainings because I think most of what you learn you don't remember. But if you're applying it to your life today and cases that you use in nimble ways and in accessible ways, there's much more of an inclination to internalize and to use those strategies moving forward. So that's what I got.
A lot. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
did a lot.
And there have been quite a lot of questions, and now I hope you can see all the clapping hands filling your screen. Thank you to everybody for participating. I can't echo enough how much we appreciate you taking the time again to share with us all of your work, and to use the real life examples and the real life people, and then also to not just diagnose the problems, but also provide tools that are adapted to how we live today. To address and improve all of the conflicts that are going on. Maria, would you like to say anything? It's kind of again, thanks to you as well, Maria, for being the first intro into Peter's journey that has brought us to here.
Thank you, Nikki, and thank you, Peter. This has been an amazing session once again, and being able to take the work of this field and to make it applicable and relevant is so important, because one of the key challenges that we often struggle with in this field is how relevant are we, particularly when there are crises.
Yeah,
It's not unusual for leaders to try to find the quick solutions, the easy ones. And unfortunately, we can't just hand them those quick solutions. I often um, think that, it would be amazing if we had those diagnostic tools that the medical field has,
yeah,
and some of the remedies that they can offer their patients. Uh,
yeah,
we are really limited in our diagnostic tools and our remedies. So
yeah.
starting this work is just so important because it's so foundational for our existence as a field as we mature.
Mm.
So I can't thank you enough for being a thought leader in helping us to navigate these minefields of complex conflict. We are literally at 9:58. We have time for perhaps one
One question, yeah.
person asking a
Yeah,
question.
let me just quickly say, Maria, that I wanted to give a shout out. I saw that John Paul Lederach was here last month, I think, and John Paul Lederach has been a hero of mine and I can say a friend of mine for a long time. And I've learned so much from Lederach, and his work and his experience is so grounded. And as Andre Bartoli and others who work in the field of usually international deadly conflict and bring so many insights. And I've stolen so much as I have from them that I can take it into the lab, see is there ways that we can refine it and make it better. And so I really see them, people like you that work in the field as partners in a journey like this of trying to learn from both practice and experience, which is what we've been trying to do.
Yeah, ditto.
And I just want to, there was people have been getting a load error with the course email list. I just wanted to flag that. But
Okay.
there should be ways if you go to the main website to get on the waiting list at least to find out more about things and to follow up later.
Yeah,
So
I'm glad to know that. That's helpful. I will check into that immediately. If you go to the center website, it's the Morton Deutsch International Center for Cooperation and Conflict Resolution. It's ICCCR at Columbia. You can probably get access there, but I'm sure we'll repair it and have it up in an hour or so. I don't know what happened. Maybe we just like inundated with interest. That'd be great.
I was gonna say it's like it's the Oprah problem, you know, you're
Uh,
you're on a big
yeah.
but I think that's great. I mean, my view of this is that conflict training is going to become the new media training.
Mm,
I really think that understanding a little bit, digging down into the more substantial and influential issues that we're facing now is so
yeah,
important for all leaders. And, we've talked about big L leaders and little L leaders and the opportunity for people that have this kind of awareness and training to step in and become leaders if they're comfortable with some of the skills and tools and observational perceptiveness that this kind of information gives them. More power, and we need all of the people working to help in this day and age. So thank you so much. I put in the other website for people to navigate and be persistent.
thank you very much. And Nikki, thank you so much for shepherding this and for organizing us. And you've done an excellent job. Really appreciate that.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Appreciate everybody's time. And as we said, we build this community, session by session. You're a repeat speaker, and we hope to look forward to your new innovations and research and inventions, and to have you have a five-peat sometime in the future. And thank you to everybody.
I'm aiming for 10.
Excellent.
All right. Be
On
well,
that
everyone.
note,
Happy holidays and take care of yourselves.
yes, on that note, thank you, everyone, and see you in January.
Thank you, everybody.